UX Podcast Episode 278.
I'm James Roy Lawson.
And I'm Pat Axbom.
And this is UX Podcast, balancing business, technology, people and society every other Friday for over a decade. And with listeners in 200 countries and territories from Guatemala to Colombia.
Nice. And today we have for you a link show when we, during our digital travels, find links, surprise each other with these articles. So we have two articles for you. And
I think we surprise each other. It's like I kind of run round to your lakeside cottage and then you wake up in the morning and I'm at your window holding a printout of a Medium article. Traumatized.
That's the way it went down.
That's exactly how we plan these episodes.
We have an article about design systems, which actually is entitled "The Era of Design Systems is Gone."
Yeah, it's originally by Serioza Plashinsky. I'm terrible with names, especially Russian names are not even easy for me.
Seriosha Plachinsky is what
you're so much better.
But I have no idea.
So much better. Now, but you're better at doing it anyway. And that was the original author. And this has been translated by Onchki.
Right.
Don't really know so much more about Onchki.
It's a publication with several writers, I think.
It seems to be a person and seems to also be a host of a podcast, and the person seems to be Russian in Germany.
That would be fantastic if they could just follow up and let us know.
Yes, that would be good.
And the second article we have for you is a follow-up article by Lisa Angela, who we had her first article a year ago on the show as well. Toxicity in digital design. A status report is this one, which is the follow-up to the one last year was Undoing the Toxic Dogmatism of Digital Design.
Yeah, and she actually opens that article with, "No, seriously, it's been a year."
Yeah. And
that is really a very good opening line to that article, but we'll get to that.
Yes.
So first up is "The Era of Design Systems is Gone," which, as we mentioned in the introduction, this is an article that was originally written back in May 2020 in Russian by Per
Seriosha Plachinsky.
Thank you very much. And this then has been translated into English. As always, when you translate something, it gets a little bit rough around the edges at various points, but I think it's what attracted me to this article anyway was the fact that it gives you a glimpse into another culture.
Yes.
Russia is one of those places in the world that there's a little bit of a barrier to what's going on there because the character set and the language is very different to what we use, and there just doesn't feel like there's a huge amount of overlap at times between the design community in Russia and the rest of the world. Maybe that's just my westernized view on it all, or the way that our design world is dominated by English-speaking things. But I really like it when we do get these glimpses into these other worlds, and that was the main reason why I wanted to. It's one of the main reasons, giving us the opportunity to talk about something from another culture on the show. And also, I think it's actually got some interesting points to do with design systems. And that is what the article's about. It's not just a generic article about design systems. It's about the history or the development, the journey of design systems as a thing in Russian design and development over the last 6 years, 5-6 years, I guess.
7 years even. It starts out in 5-6 years. Okay. Right.
Yeah, I mean it's basically it starts by going through the recent history of Russian design systems, and pinpoints the beginning of it all to a CSS conference that was held back in 2016. So it goes back a little further with the global side of things with like Brad Frost's Atomic Design, Sketch, iOS 7 that came in 2014 with its flat design. It mentions also things like material design, IBM's design language, Lightning, MailChimp, BBC's Gel, and also goes into the idea that that was born, rather the thing that was born from that, with graphic editing software had no future. It became obsolete, and that components and the code itself were the source of truth.
Right.
So,
Even this concept of design engineers, which I think is either designers independent of developers or developers independent of designers, and building the solution by just piecing together stuff from a design system.
yeah, it's a hybrid role, and yeah, you're right. The article doesn't really go into the makeup of that role completely, other than it is expected that one person will be doing both of these jobs.
I remember even when way back when we were looking into these things that people were talking about now automated design. So AIs would take a design system and build a website for us, and we would become obsolete.
I still think you've got the whole kind of thing with the designs get created for you and you judge them. But that's another show, Per, and another kind of topic. It's still going to happen. But this the author speculates about the rising demand for design engineers and tech solutions that accelerate the release cycle came during a period of renewed economic growth in Russia after the fall of the ruble from 2015 to 2018, and may have been a response to the shortage of skilled labour. So this is fascinating that you're seeing how apparently the Russian design and development community is looking towards the global trends, which are rife at this point, and looking at their own situation with who's available to work on stuff. And the natural, I suppose, evolution of that is that you create hybrid roles to keep going forward and to keep doing stuff to achieve something that's expected of you at that period of time. And we all know when you've got a period of economic growth and things are booming, then there is that momentum, and you're expected to kind of keep on going. So it's a plausible, from what we've read and know about it, then it's a plausible explanation of the situation.
I really like that, connecting what is happening in design to a broader view of what is happening in society and in a specific culture. I think we do that too seldom, really. We really should think about where we fit in a larger context, and more perhaps on a local scale than in a design industry scale.
Yeah. It makes me think as well, Per, about going back to like the mobile web, that we've discussed how in certain countries in the world, often it's particular countries in the continent of Africa that get brought up as examples, where they've just completely skipped the desktop web.
Right.
It doesn't exist as a thing because people don't have desktop computers. They have mobile devices that are internet connected. So when you look at things from a world point of view, it isn't the case that every single country or territory in the world follows exactly the same development path of web digital design as each other. Some steps will get missed or jumped or ignored, or and it's not because they're not relevant steps, just that circumstances are different.
But that's a really good point, because it's such a huge trap for some junior designers who go online to search for design education. They watch a few videos on YouTube, and what they get is largely a representation of Western design culture, which may not be what they actually need from their own perspective where they're designing.
Yeah, Western design culture and Western circumstances. Absolutely. So the article then goes on to say, then we hit 2019. And what seems to... It actually, I suppose it gets a little bit more tricky, I think, the article now. Is it says that this all came to an end. Basically, the hype around design systems seems to have come to an end around 2019 in Russia. There was an example of a design systems club, and that now it only had links to 8 design systems. And I'll quote, all of them, by and large, copy each other and are branding pages with sets of basic elements and principles. And all the differences boil down to who chooses which font and colour palette. the article also then goes on to a little critique of a published design system, or actually a set of a library of basic components, and it pointed out that the graphic editing software that seemed to be getting made redundant by the hybrid designer engineers seemed to have survived the war with code, as the article says, mainly thanks to Figma. And it's remained a tool of a designer. It also says that it seems that only mobile design is the thing that lends itself to some sort of systemization. Again, these points just are talking just about this published set of components, the library. But it, from a point of view of reflections on design systems and how they'd been developed, used, applied in Russia, it's really interesting.
I did like what he said about the Design Systems Club and the links that were posted within that forum, where it actually seemed like all of the design systems, the eight links, they sort of copy each other, and they had the same basic sets of elements and principles. And the differences really are what font and color palette are you using?
Exactly. I think, like the quote I said there, it's kind of already iterated to something standard. And the article also points out that in the author's experience, these standard components that you get from these libraries rarely solve things. They just exist to purely save time. But that's not a design system. It is just a library of basic components that aren't thought through and designed for your context and situation, and that I really can relate to, because I mean I've been part of plenty of projects and teams where things have been pulled in, libraries have been pulled in, and it gets you over the line quicker in the first iteration. Then you test it, you analyze it, you get feedback on it, and you realize that wasn't maybe really great. You kind of knew that anyway, because you were just getting stuff done, you were shipping stuff, and then when you realize the investment to make your own, and you add all this up, you kind of start to realize that rolling your own from the beginning probably might well have been the cheaper and better option. So it works to use these standard components if you are aware of the fact maybe they are going to be a stepping stone and need to just kind of use it to get something out there, analyze and iterate. But I think too many times we use it as an end solution.
And when he talks about the learnings or the problems or the takeaways from this, it's that it seems that products really have to move fast, so they change quickly to be competitive. And the design system doesn't really allow for that, because if you want to add a new component to a design pattern library or what have you, that takes time. And people just want to get the product out. So they're getting frustrated.
Yeah. The quote there is, it's quite a ruthless one. And the business doesn't care whether it's done using a system or not, as long as you're not, as long as it's the case that you're losing to your competitors. So what they're saying there is the ruthlessness of business, that sod your design system, we're bleeding cash kind of thing. That is one of the difficulties with getting buy-in for design systems. So why do they exist? What is the benefit of having an overarching design system of maybe multiple products, maybe even multiple brands and companies? And it is a challenge. And the cohesion of all that is very difficult to maintain.
I really, really like the point he makes about unskilled designers and experienced designers as well. So even an unskilled designer with even the most elaborate tool will still do poorly. So this is the thinking that a lot of people seem to have, that if you have the design system, then you can take a junior designer, just give them that, and they have all the pieces to put together something that works. And on the other hand, if you have a skilled designer and you tell them this is what you have to use, they stop to analyze and think critically, is what he says, and this stops their development. And I can identify, you kind of get frustrated as well.
I think what's an interesting conclusion from this article was that the author thinks that these design engineers and possibly even to a degree design systems disappeared because of the emergence of cross-functional teams and companies having the resources for engineers to engineer and designers to design. So what he's saying is basically Russia reached a maturity point where they saw the value in having dedicated resources to do stuff, so they didn't need to be doing the quick and dirty stuff as much, and that it turns out to be better.
Right.
A strong team, strong communication within the team, strong art leadership, and gradually after the big guys, everyone will start investing in it. Was one of the quotes from towards the end of the article.
Yeah. And the article itself has a quote from Spotify Design that I really, really like, because I think that is one of my biggest takeaways, that this doesn't mean that you don't need a design system or that you shouldn't have one. It's how you use the design system and how you communicate it to the people who are using it. So the Spotify quote is, "Each team should be empowered to diverge from our recommendations, acknowledging that one solution may not work for everyone." So the crux of it is, does the team feel confident enough to diverge?
Yeah.
And to be able to do that, you need experienced designers.
Yeah. And I know we normally go with recommended listening at the end of the show, but really good recommended listening there would be our interview of Gina Ann from a number of years ago about design systems, because she talks exactly about that with you need to have that flexibility. Brad Frost has also mentioned it. We've talked to him that it's not dogma.
Exactly. Moving on to Lisa Angela's follow-up article, I'll have to say, to her article from 1 year ago. And you're right, it surprised me when she wrote that it is actually a year ago. Time moves in strange ways these times. Oh,
I actually could have sworn it was just before the summer.
Yeah, I would say, have said it's a couple of months ago we did that.
Yeah, this timeline is really weird.
So her first article from a year ago is Undoing the Toxic Dogmatism of Digital Design. It's a very well-written critique of the digital design industry, and it immediately got huge attention and shares across the world, I'll say. And we brought it up here on the show in episode, I haven't checked out yet. 252. And in it, Lisa describes the design industry as a living paradox with a lack of self-awareness and incredible inconsistencies in quality. And she called out a number of issues related to education methods, seniority levels, lack of exploration and hierarchy and ethics and inclusiveness. And she posted some reflections now and additions. And again, we want to bring them to your attention. Because first, her own reflections on the first article relate to what her expectations were and what happened. She had expected more backlash, and she didn't get that. That actually made her more aware that these problems actually were something that the design industry seems to be aware of, but not dealing with.
So she expected more people to say to her, "You're wrong."
Exactly.
And they didn't.
She also felt there was too much focus on her as a person. So people thought, well, now you're the spokesperson for this. And she didn't want to become the spokesperson for the ills plaguing digital design. So she sort of had to turn down some speaker engagements just because she didn't want to be that her thing. But also her network expanded, and I can relate to that. I mean, if you do posts that a lot of people read, you get a lot of interesting conversations going, which is lots of fun as well. But I think let's get real then about the issues that Lisa, with her keen eye, still sees that we digital designers get wrong.
The additional 4 that she brings up in this article.
Exactly. We don't share critiques of successful work enough. This is interesting because our go-to thing, it seems, in UX that I hear a lot about, we need to share about all the things that go wrong, the experimentation and how we fail. But rarely do we actually, and she's so right about it, rarely do we actually critique the things that went really, really well and show people this is what we did to make it go really well. So all those processes, she's obviously not talking about UI. Lots of people love to talk about UI, and this is so beautiful, and this is how people click and use it. She's talking about, how you work as a team and the processes and the frameworks that make something a success. And I love because this really relates to the first article we talked about just now. She says, we adopt design systems we don't even like because they're robust, complete, and come from the design teams of big successful companies. I'm looking at you, material design. Mm-hmm. I love that quote just because of what we just talked about. Because it seems that we are actually letting go of some competence and taking shortcuts.
Yeah, but especially like material design, when you're faced in an organization by a thing, a monolith like material design, and like Google are saying, we've spent X tens of thousands of man hours designing this. We've had studios with lamps, and we've been moving lamps from different angles to see the shadowing, so we can develop the layers and kind of think it through. I mean, as a designer in a organization, and you're looking up to that, you can understand that it's difficult to fight back against it. It looks massive. The resources in there look massive.
Exactly.
But it doesn't mean to say we shouldn't be critical.
Right. Exactly, and which should be the role that we're playing as UXers. That is what we say that we are competent at and adept at. Her second point is about power dynamics. She doesn't welcome someone looking at her avatar and assuming things about her identity that give them license to educate her, which goes for so many people. And I think this is something we see a lot on social media, but I think we forget that, and even let's say a person like myself who has quite a large following on Twitter can forget that the effect that me replying to someone has on surfacing that conversation to a lot of followers. So you boost the visibility of the discussion to outside of the original poster's network, which means that if it's a controversial topic, that can it can be, as she says, quite traumatic for that person, for someone who's less experienced and junior or from a historically excluded group. So this is really a point about letting people know that they should think more before talking on social media, or in other contexts as well, because their voice is heard to such an incredible extent because they have a large following, they have a large name in the industry. And so if you have a substantial following, just think about your impact a lot more.
Do you know what, though, Per? I think it's not just about substantial following. I mean, a lot of this, it's down to the white male thing, which is so incredibly frustrating and annoying. The amount of times you see, and it is white men.
It is
jumping on conversations.
Yeah. You see it all the time.
And it just absolutely, I mean, that's the thing, it's absolutely shocking, some of the conversations that get highlighted to me, to you as well, from people showing what kind of rubbish men do online to people. And, for us it's difficult to understand because we are white men. But it really just, it upsets me at times seeing the kind of stuff people have to put up with. And it's even more upsetting when it's people of stature, you could say, people with a power position on social media or in our design industry that still maybe don't kind of think twice before jumping on someone's tweet or comment or something. Exactly.
I love her summary of this as well. Don't assume you have to participate in the conversation at all. Which I think is something that I do tend to think about a lot more. There's no reason to participate in every conversation that you feel some sort of emotion regarding. Sometimes the best thing you can do is actually stay away.
Yeah. We take up quite a bit of space anyway, Per.
Not enough. I'm on to number 3 now. Not enough historically excluded folks own alternative channels of design education. And this was actually sort of related to what I was saying earlier about acknowledging how many different types, and you were saying as well, different types of design contexts there are in different countries across the world, on different continents, but in different localities in many different ways. And we are looking at, so many in the industry are looking at the same types of leaders and the same types of design, looking at models and tools that seem to be the same and should be applied everywhere, which just is not the case. So this is why there needs to be, to a large extent, so many more people from other walks of life to be the educators.
Yeah. And what we see as our design community, design world, as we mentioned in the first article, is very much English speaking and white.
Yeah.
I mean, we know from the listening to the podcast, it's Americans followed by Brits, followed by, well, Swedes, but that's kind of a quirk of geography, and then Australians, which is not surprising given that it's an English-speaking podcast about design. But that is then an ecosystem. It's a bubble that perpetuates, and it also means that there's not enough people from the minorities in those countries at the top of the pile when it comes to the conferences, the publishing companies, the educational platforms and courses.
Exactly. We need to do better. I'll move on to number 4. We don't know where to put our frustration with how things are, so we're directing it to all the wrong things. And this really struck a chord with me because I'm so involved in this ethics space, and it's really easy to get into that frame of mind where you think, well, if you're not really concerned with what's going on in the tech space and how people are getting hurt, then you're not caring enough. And Lisa, I think, is making a really good point here that some people actually aren't suited. Well, they don't have time to care, or they just want to do their job, and they want to do their job well. But being an advocate for responsible design is not for everyone, and we have to accept that. If we are these people who stand up at the front of these debates and say that we need to do better with regards to ethics, well, some people just also need to do their jobs. Not everyone can be a change maker is the word she uses, and so not everyone has to identify as that. And we need to allow that. We need to stop with these conflicts happening within the design guild, if you will. Some people just want to do good enough work and make a decent living, and that's fine. That's fine.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's fine. It's at the end of the day, your individual needs to survive, and taking the moral high ground is hard. And in some cultures, that's going to be harder than others.
Yeah.
I mean, we know how it is in America. The way that your job is packaged with your healthcare and other aspects, maybe even the mortgage of your house and so on. That you don't have that privilege of being able to kind of just I quit. I'm not doing this and move on, which puts you into a ethical dilemma that you've got to continue working because you need to work and you don't feel as if you can shift. And it seems you maybe don't feel as if you can point things out, call things out, fight for change, because it might get you thrown out of that organization. That's not the case in all cultures and all countries, but it's going to be tough for a lot of people, and it's not going to be the choice that some people want to make or feel that they have the space, opportunity to make.
Exactly. So it's about allowing other people to be who they are. And the approach I try to take, and I know I don't always succeed in it, and that's part of it, but you want to know what approach you want to take. For me, it's like, if you want to make a change, here are some insights and tools that help me. So I want to share that. But if you don't want to participate in the types of stuff that I'm doing, that's fine. Maybe you can't for some reason that I don't understand, or it's none of my business, and that's okay too. But sort of lead by example, by showcasing this is how I work, and also be humble and open to critique and understanding that there are also a lot of other ways of doing it.
I mean, it's like you say, Perra, we know that change comes from within. That phrase, and a lot of the time, I suppose, is understanding what you value and making little changes to what you do. That might be over time what actually does make the big change, because we've made tens of thousands of small changes. Yeah, because this is a big juggernaut of a machine. Is this? It's because it's not just design. It's business, and it's society, and it's cultures, and there's so many things pulling so many directions. So it's going to be a big ask for one person or a small number of people to stand up and drag it to a new direction.
It's so hard, and just having this conversation with you right now is actually putting ideas into my head about our responsibilities that feel uncomfortable, and I like that because that is the purpose of her post, and that's fine, and that's why we need to have these conversations. Because as we've mentioned time and time again now, we are two white men, middle-aged white men doing this show. And we have a lot of people listening to us from across the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also makes me think about how the amount of times when you don't kind of criticize, well, criticize maybe is too strong a word, but when you think that maybe something isn't doing the job it should, whether it's a framework or a way of working, or just it's something that you don't feel is quite right, and there's an expectation that you don't criticize it, or that you don't kind of shout out against it. So that pushes you back in your box as such, that you don't feel comfortable with lifting a question about something, because maybe it'd be seen as you're inexperienced, you don't understand, you've misunderstood.
Right.
You're wrong. All these things are feelings you get, and they might be right, some of them, but I suppose I'd like us to be better at not being as hostile when somebody just is querying something.
Exactly, because that's the thing. They're querying, they're trying something out, and they're testing it. Because what happens is, and what can happen so easily, especially then on Twitter and other types of social media, is that somebody posts something, an idea, and somebody goes in and totally destroys that with the way they say that they're wrong, instead of being curious and trying to get more information about what makes you think that way, and trying to understand the other perspective. And once that argument is going on, if somebody's with a lot of followers, then at once there are 10 more comments. And then coming in from the side and trying to defend that first person, all of a sudden it's just this mess of arguments. It's just not, it's embarrassing the way people are behaving.
Yeah. I suppose some of it might be the fact that people are protecting their spaces.
As well, yes.
Yeah. If someone's been working with a particular thing or a particular framework, or something has proved to be successful for them, then that's going to increase, I guess, the natural defensive reaction if someone is exploring it or calling it out maybe as something that maybe isn't working for everyone.
Yeah.
There was also towards the end of the article, then it's a couple of things. Design humanitarianism. So design humanitarian. That was an interesting phrase. Yeah. But I also love the quote: "Don't shout down, shout louder." Lisa says.
Yes.
So rather than just arguing about stuff and kind of talking something down, then take your thing and just talk more about that thing. Exactly. Is my interpretation of what she means there.
I agree. Because that fits with her final words. Choose an issue that you care deeply about, that feels personal to you. Think carefully about how much time and energy you can reasonably commit to it, and find a community that will hold you accountable. I like that as well, for doing the work. And then don't worry about perfection. I like that as well. Just do your best to keep going and stay involved. And I totally agree with your interpretation. Find your thing, be vocal about that, and stop destroying other people's arguments or ideas and explorations. So we've already mentioned some listening ideas for next. The Lisa episode was 252.
That is correct.
Yes.
Yes, Lisa is 252. That was a year ago, absolutely amazingly. I've also mentioned episode 268, which was Managing Design Systems with Brad Frost from just before the summer. And, of course, I also mentioned the Gina Ann podcast, which that's 4 years ago now, episode 163.
Oh wow!
So historically, it ties in nicely with the period of time we're talking about with the Russian design systems article.
Remember to keep moving.
See you on the other side.
So, James, you know how many ears Captain Kirk has?
Well, I think I know how many ears Captain Kirk has. Do I need to guess?
Yeah, it's 3.
3?
Yeah.
What?
The left ear, the right ear, and the final front ear.
Oh,